This is Real Estate Real Talk, a weekly podcast about real estate industry news that actually matters, hosted by some of the industry's leading agents. Here are this week's hosts.
Welcome back to the Real Estate Real Talk podcast. Our guest today is Steve Epstein, who's a lifelong CRS member and a great instructor. Steve was featured as an expert in a recent residential specialist article titled Engineering the Offer. It was such a great article, so much good information, that we wanted to invite Steve back to the podcast to dive into that subject even deeper. Steve, can we get started by sharing your background and how you got into real estate?
Well, back in the dark ages, aka the 80s, I was in the entertainment business. And in the 80s, the entertainment business was a hotbed of activity that was not conducive to healthy living. I didn't have an issue with it, but I was working with a lot of people, especially in the music business, that were engaging in a lot of activities I found to be less than professional. This is the most delicate way I can put it. I started taking night classes at the local city college. I'm a lifelong learner, which explains all the initials after my name and a variety of other things. But I started taking night classes at city college. I had an amazing real estate instructor who said, look, whether you're just going to get into the business or not, if you were thinking about getting your license, now that you've done this coursework, you're eligible and you should maybe do it while it's fresh. I went, I'll get a real estate license. And, that was the beginning of the journey. My first official act was July 3rd of 1988.
It's great to have members who have a depth of knowledge and experience. Steve, how were you first introduced to our organization, and why did you decide to earn your CRS designation?
Well, I'm not sure today because obviously I haven't had to do it for a while, but back in the day, you had to do a different designation as a stepping stone to get your CRS. And I think it was my training director at the time said, hey, look, this course is coming to Santa Barbara. You should consider doing it. And again, the lifelong learner thing said, well, great. This is a way to level up in an industry I'm just getting into. So that was great. I did joke between getting a variety of designations early on. At one point, I was joking that I was probably the most educated, most underpaid real estate agent in Santa Barbara. Fortunately, I was able to fulfill the most educated part or get in that group and deal with the problem of being the most underpaid. That was almost 2,700 transactions.
I'm sure your business has grown since then. Would you mind sharing with our listeners the market you're in and what your business looks like today?
Absolutely. So I serve the entire southern half of Santa Barbara County. And for those who may not know, Santa Barbara is about an hour and a half to 2 hours north of Los Angeles. So it goes Los Angeles, Ventura County, Santa Barbara County. So we do have a lot of LA influence, and then we have a lot of folks with second homes here or that want to get out of LA and end up here. Had a showing like that yesterday. But we serve the entire southern half of Santa Barbara County, and then we go up over the hills into the Santa Ynez Valley, which is our big wine district. My team is a total of 9 folks, 8 licensees, and 1 full-time marketing director who is not licensed because she doesn't need to be. But even our director of operations is licensed and is in the field working, covering, backing all of us up and able to do her own book of business. So we have a great team of folks that have a very diverse background, set of background experiences. And it's been quite a journey building a team. I'm actually building out a new class specific to team building. Don't make all the mistakes I did. But anyway, that's in a nutshell. That's kind of the business we're running. Good year, we'll do 150 million. Bad year, a little over 100 million. That usually represents 50 to 75 deals. We're not a high volume practice. We prefer low volume and more hands-on and more high touch over high tech.
I like that you talked about all the things that go into building a team, similar to all the steps that go into building a winning offer. Before we dive into today's topic, which is about engineering the offer, we'd be remiss to not touch on what the real estate market is like today. How would you describe our current real estate market and how it's evolved over the years?
Well, obviously, I think anybody watching this who's in the industry will know that real estate is hyper-local. For instance, the reports I'm hearing from the Los Angeles market, which again is only an hour and a half or 2 hours away, is that things are very slow there. We're not slow here yet. Our market's doing pretty well. We've seen some very minor pricing retrenchments in the last 2 months. We've seen year-over-year prices dip a few percent, nothing crazy. I'll let you know when we get the stats for this month. If this is starting to become a trend, I would not call 2 months a trend yet. But, our market's actually doing pretty well, and well-priced properties sell relatively quickly and often with multiple offers, certainly in certain price points.
We know how important pricing is when it comes to an offer. What does that mean to you in today's market?
Well, I actually teach a class called Win the Deal with the Right Offer. And your offer is everything. Your offer is your calling card. It's what you're wearing. It's how you speak. And I'm saying, it's everything. I teach another class called Finding Your Luxury Business. And I get up in front of the class and I say, hey, is it okay to judge people? Everybody goes, oh, no, you don't want to judge people. And I go, well, you're right in the context that you're thinking of judging folks, but really somebody watching this is judging me now. They're like, why did he choose that shirt? Look, his hairline's receding and I like the background in the podcast. You can't help it, right? So if you think about it in that context, everything that you do and say and how you behave when you're writing, presenting, the whole structure of your offer is your calling card. And the agents that come at our team with offers, especially in a multiple offer situation, which we've had a lot of over the last almost 10 years, everything that you can do to make it look like you are the polished professional that you are and that you're going to make this process easy for everybody and not be that agent that is a pain in the rear and all of those things. So your offer is really your calling card. And making sure that everything that you do to structure that offer and present it properly wins the deal. I got 2 offers on a property yesterday. Neither one of those agents even bothered to pick up the phone and call me to ask any questions about what they may want to consider doing to make the offer more attractive. Things like, how long do your clients want to get out of the home? Do they want to rent back? Do they want to get out quickly? Is there anything they want to include in the sale that we didn't know about that may not have been in the MLS? Those kinds of things, right? It's amazing to me how easy it is to do it right and how many people don't get that.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, I want to make sure that we come back to the mistakes people make later. But for now, I want to know what a strong offer looks like in today's market. What are some key factors that agents need to be considering?
Well, look, again, had those agents called me, I would have explained to them the various things that are sort of showstoppers for my clients or things that would really be attractive to them to sweeten the pot, right? So if you ask enough questions, if you show up curious and you ask enough questions, that information is power, right? If information wasn't power, companies like Google wouldn't be data mining the entire world because all that information is powerful. So picking up the phone and understanding what the non-starters or the real attractive points may be to a seller is critical in doing this. And I'm sorry to keep harping on it, but it's so important and so few people are doing it now. We're in this high-tech world where we don't pick up the phone and call people. It's mind-boggling. But it's not just price, right? Somebody may take a much lower price even in a multiple offer situation if they like the buyers, if they're empathetic to the buyers or the buyers are empathetic to their situation, if they sense any personal connection. And your offer is, again, that calling card. And I think the other thing that a lot of agents miss out on is cultivating the agent-to-agent relationships. It's relatively easy for us here in Santa Barbara because out of the 13 or 1,400 members of the MLS, there's probably 50 actual agents doing most of the work. So it's not that hard to, understand those agents, be in some sort of relationship with them, cultivate those relationships. But as agents, we want to work with people that we know and trust. So you need to cultivate those relationships long before you need to present your offer. So, meet the other agents at broken open houses or weekend opens or real estate events. Offer value and collaboration. Sharing is critical. Once you get to the offer phase, make it hard for the seller to say no. What I say when I'm coaching buyers is you don't necessarily need to give them everything they're asking for, but make it hard for them to turn your offer down, right? I mean, the joke I say is back when we used to actually use a pen to sign offers. I mean, I'm so old, we used to, chisel offers on concrete stones. But if you write a really low offer or something that's just crazy, it's really easy for the seller to say no. I want the buyers to envision the sellers going, it's not exactly what I want. And their hands almost shaking as it goes down to sign it because they know if they sign it, it gets them closer to whatever it is they need to do. It moves their ball down the field, right? So you don't necessarily have to give them what they want, but don't just make it easy to say no, because then you end up bidding against yourself. So, understand the local rules, the standards of practice. We get LA agents that come up here and they write offers and they don't understand how we do real estate here any more or less than I understand how it's done regionally in Los Angeles. Again, it's a hyper-local process. And for instance, some communities in California have a city transfer tax. We don't, but people check those boxes, right? We have a documentary transfer tax for the county, but that's the kind of thing. They just check all the boxes because they don't know, or they check all the boxes and they say, if applicable. I would say, if you're working outside an area of your expertise, like another county or 2 or 3 counties away, you might want to partner with another CRS in that community to help you win the deal, because they'll know, a good agent will know what the local customs are and what's structured, how, and what the mandatory government inspections may be, and all of those things. So it's our job to know these things. And if we don't, and we just fill out an offer willy-nilly, that's your calling card. So again, before you write the offer, gather as much intel as possible. Information has power. Show up curious. Build your question tree before the call. Don't tip your hand. I never say, hey, I'm writing an offer, because I don't know. I've had clients say, we're going to write an offer, and then a couple hours later, they're like, no, we just can't step up to that price, or we really don't want to be in that area. What I say is, my client likes the home. If they decide to make an offer, what do I need to know? The other reason I don't want to say I'm writing an offer is that I don't really want them to call all the other agents that said, hey, my client's not quite ready yet, but call me if you get anything. So I don't want to give them any more time to make my situation more competitive. They're going to do that, of course, but I don't want to encourage that behavior any more or less than I have to. So I don't tip my hand. I don't say what they're going to write, because that will probably change too. But always inquire when you call the listing agent as to what's most important to the seller. Not that you can deliver all those things, but it's good to know, because if those things aren't important to your buyer and you can give those up to the seller, you might get a better term or condition somewhere else in the deal, right? But give the seller what they want. If it doesn't matter, and dig in on what's critical to the buyer.
Really important insights. You mentioned that pricing is important, but it's not everything when it comes to an offer. Can you tell us an example where maybe it was a multiple offer situation and your client ended up winning, even though they didn't have the highest price? Is there a way that you structured an offer that was hard for the sellers to turn down?
100%. And by the way, the other people in your team, AKA your lender, is critical to the offer. I was in a multiple offer situation. My client was not a cash buyer, but I was up against a couple of offers that were all cash. But I had the rockstar lender in Santa Barbara with the pre-approval letter. I also had her call the listing agent to reassure her that this buyer had been properly vetted and pre-approved. And that other agent said, the pre-approval letter from that lender, as far as I'm concerned, is as good as an all-cash offer. So let that sink in. So we won that deal over cash offers. And that's hard to do. I mean, all things being equal, if I have 5 offers and they're essentially identical, but 2 of them are all cash and 3 of them have loans, most sellers prioritize the all cash deals just because it reduces a couple of potential friction points, right? What if it doesn't appraise? What if the people lose their job? What if, there's a lot of what ifs. And if you can remove a few what ifs, why not?
That brings up another question. We're looking at the market today and we're seeing more potential buyers stepping away from their offers. Maybe they just get cold feet or realize the payments are going to be a little harder than they thought, even though they were approved. What advice would you give agents, not only to craft their best offer, but to keep the client's best interest in mind when putting an offer on the table, making it a place where buyers feel more confident in the whole process?
Well, I'm a big fan of a guy named Phil M. Jones, who wrote a book called Exactly What to Say for Real Estate. I'm sure I have one in my little office library right to my left here. And what he would tell you to do, and I'm going to paraphrase here, but he would probably suggest that if you had enough information about the motivation of your buyers, right, you had asked a lot of questions, but a lot of the right questions as to what it is they're hoping to accomplish, why they're hoping to accomplish it, when they're, all of those things, right? So that when people do get cold feet, you can remind them what it is that drove them to call you, hire you, sign the buyer broker agreement, look at properties, write offers. Things like, hey, based on the fact you said you really want to get a larger home before your next child comes, maybe we should consider X or Y, right? Those types of things. Phil likes to say that, the professional sports teams don't show up and practice on game day. They practice before game day. So I would encourage everybody to do some role playing, run some conversations. We don't use the word scripts, but, practice some conversations. Think about the questions you need to ask so that you have the information to properly help your clients. Most of the behavior you just described is fear-based, right? They look at it and they go, yeah, I know I'm pre-approved for that, but God, do I really want to spend $4,000 a month on a mortgage or whatever it is, right? But if you have enough of the background information, it's powerful to help you guide people through the process they asked you to guide them through it. We talk to people about building out the questions and then sort of replaying the information back to them and reminding them what it is that they wanted to do to begin with. It's saying, well, you're sort of doing this mind game or some manipulation. Please remember, we didn't force these people to approach us, help them get pre-approved, show them property and write offers. They asked us to help them do that. When they get fearful and get cold feet is when you need to have the skills to basically be a counselor. I mean, look, we're not allowed to be counselors without a license. We're licenses. We're not allowed to give legal advice because we're not attorneys. We're not CPAs. But let's face it, we are really psychologists. I mean, there's a lot of hand-holding in this business. And so I jokingly say I'm a casual, unlicensed psychologist because there's just so much counseling that we do. And a lot of it's emotional, right? So don't get caught up in the business and become transactional. If you stay relational versus transactional, you can counsel people through these things.
I think that's why it's so important when it comes to first-time homebuyers to pick an agent that's going to be there to support you every step of the way, which is why we always say look for a CRS agent because they're the best of the best. And there's a lot of first-time homebuyers who may be intimidated when they're going to the offer table, when they see that other potential buyers may have cash offers. But it's exactly the point that you referenced. If you have a good agent, the way you structure the offer can give you the upper hand. Could you dive deeper into some of the other strategies when it comes to pitching for a client who may not have a cash offer or even the highest offer?
Well, I think, and one of the reasons I love the CRS community is, you touched on this, is it seems to be agents that are maybe a little more serious about the business, right? They've taken the time to do the education, be involved in a community of other top producing, like-minded real estate agents from around the country, right? So I think of it as sort of a well-educated, I don't like the word elite group, but select group. Let's call it a select group of people that have taken the industry a little more seriously, taken the education a little more seriously. And I think when you have that knowledge and you have the education and you have the experience, I think you're able to exude a calmness and sort of portray your experience that can be very reassuring. I first started in the business in 1988. If a challenge came up, I'd say, hey, let me figure this out and get back to you. Now, after almost 2,700 transactions, I can say, hey, the last 6 times this came up, this is the professional we called. Here's how we got around the problem. So that's helpful. If you exude and portray calmness and confidence and experience, it's very calming for people that are nervous, right? To just be able to say, hey, you've got this, right? Your lenders approved you. You've shared that you have the cash to do this. We've gone through all the variables. And by the way, acknowledge to them that it's really scary. I will tell you this, and this is not a joke. Every time I buy a piece of real estate, I'm thinking, what am I doing? How am I going to pay for this? Is this going to work out financially? Is the rent going to cover the expenses? Is this a place I can personally afford? I'm not immune to it. And I tell people that. I go, every time I've bought a property and I got an offer accepted, I was like, oh, what have I done? I'm going to be eating canned beans the rest of my life. I'm going to be broke. It's human nature. When you tell them that somebody who's bought and sold countless homes and properties, both for themselves and other people, that everybody feels that way, it's sort of like, hey, if you're like most people, this is probably scaring you. So by the way, when you call them to say, hey, congratulations, your offer has been accepted, acknowledge it's scary. Right? If there's an elephant in the room, just go, look, there's a big gray thing with tusks over there. Let's talk about that. That's crazy. So just be empathetic and address it before they have to, because by the time it bubbles up in them and they're addressing it, it's already taken over their mind, right? It's already really riddling them with fear.
For sure, the personal aspect of real estate is so important. You mentioned a mistake that you often see when an agent doesn't even call to ask a follow-up question before submitting an offer. What are other big mistakes that you see when agents are putting in offers?
Well, I would definitely package the offer really well. I would, certainly let people know it's coming. I mean, right as it's coming, not necessarily the day before or something, but, if you email it or drop it off, have a cover letter, have a concise bullet point summary with the key offer points. We're offering this. We want to close escrow on this day. We want this number of days for due diligence. If there's a bunch of pre-listing inspections reports, I strongly suggest, in California, we have a form called Receipt for Reports. I strongly suggest attaching that and acknowledge that you received all of those. Right? Just be methodical, right? Be intentional. I love that word. But lay it all out and make it easy for them. So all they have to do is neutralize that email, send it to their client and go, hey, when do you have time to get on the phone? Let's talk about this offer. And you've already done the job of analyzing the offer, putting in the 4, 5, 6, 8 bullet points. We want the patio furniture and the fireplace tools or whatever it is, right? Build that all out into a cover sheet. Include proof of funds. In California, the contract says it's either attached or we're going to give it to you in 3 days. When we get offers and it says we're getting it in 3 days, we go, call us in 3 days when you have it, because we really don't want to go down this road till we know you have your proof of funds. So package your proof of funds, do the cover letter, include your loan pre-approval if you're getting a loan. Don't make them wait for that. Just basic packaging, like make a nice, attractive package to drop off to them and make their life easier. And good offers project financial strength. We talked about this. Empathy, clear terms and conditions. We do not want any ambiguities, right? If you're not sure if the patio furniture is included or the refrigerator, ask for it. No, it might seem redundant. Just make it as clear as possible. There's no downside to that. Clear terms and conditions, strong paperwork and docs, and professional sincerity. And that can mean a lot of things, but I really have trouble with the lack of professionalism that I occasionally run into in this business. And again, that's why I appreciate the CRS community, because traditionally it's agents who really take the business seriously.
As you build out an offer, it can become really complex, especially if you're dealing with different strategies like rate buy-downs, appraisal grabs, seller credits. What are your tips to explain those more complex strategies to an agent, but also presenting it in an offer that's easiest to digest for the seller who's receiving it?
That's a great question. Obviously it depends on the acumen of the agent you're speaking with. The good news for me is, of the 50 plus or minus 50 agents in Santa Barbara that do most of the business, the level of professionalism's pretty high, which is great. Some of the other areas around California I've interacted with over the years. Some of the other areas, I just feel like the professionalism isn't what it could or should be. I think it's gotten better over the years. I think people are realizing this isn't just a side hustle, that it's really a career that people should take seriously. Not that we don't have people doing it as a side hustle, for sure. But, just having that professionalism and that connection is critical.
You mentioned you try to understand what is most important to the seller. Can you give an example of when you catered to the seller's priorities and how it made a difference?
I love asking really broad, open-ended questions. And for instance, in a buyer consultation, I'll sit down and we'll, do the small talk and the niceties. One of my first questions usually is, hey, in a perfect world, what does this entire process look like for you? Now, that's a really, really broad, open-ended question, right? I mean, that could mean like, we have to have a house by May 1 because we have a baby coming May 15 or something, right? You could be that specific. Or they could get into a whole thing like, the reason I'm selling my house is that, my son and his wife are starting to have grandbabies and I want to move closer to them. And, I don't want to, be out of town and miss out on any of those special moments. So for instance, by the way, in that example, if you're getting resistance from them later, you can say, hey, based on the fact you told me that what's most important to you in this process is that you get to, San Diego where your family's having grandbabies because you don't want to miss out on any of that, right? And you can redirect them and get them back on track for what it is they told you was their big why. It's what they were doing, right? So if you call the listing agent and you're representing the buyer and you're going to structure this offer, and you call the listing agent and you can have a similar question, in a perfect world, what does this look like for your sellers? And then just be quiet, which is impossible for me. It turns out I like the sound of my own voice. But ask those questions and just be quiet, because the agent may tell you, who knows what they'll tell you. They may say, they just got to sell really quickly. They're about to lose the house in foreclosure. God knows what they'll tell you. But if you could structure the deal based on what the hot buttons are for that seller, assuming they don't compromise your buyer, and they often don't, then why not? I just did an 8-day escrow that closed on Tuesday. I had the buyer, another agent in our company had the seller, but the buyer really wanted to close on the 28th. I don't know why. There's something magical about the 28th for her, and she insisted on closing on the 28th. So we opened escrow on the 20th. And we did it. Anyway, I think to answer your question about, what we've done to win the deal is we've asked a lot of questions. Then we've counseled our buyers on, hey, price is really important to you. but these folks need a little extra time after the close to get out or to find their rental or, their other replacement property. And if you don't need to occupy it right away, let's structure a little rent back for them or something. That was very popular in COVID. The rent back thing was huge. But it's a matter of doing the investigative work to structure the offer so that you can dig in on what's important and give the other side what's not. Whether it's appliances or a buy down the buy down's interesting because the seller can still say, hey, I sold my house for $1 million, right? Sometimes that's ego driven. Like they don't want to sell their house for less than $1 million. And so then it's like, great, but can you credit the buyer to buy down their rate a little bit so they can actually afford to get in there?
You mentioned when it comes to packaging your offer, the best way is to include a cover letter with all the details. What is your approach to drafting these, and how much information about your clients do you put in there? Because sometimes a buyer is hesitant to share too much information about themselves, but then we also see that sharing a bit of information can help them win the deal. Let us know your approach to situations like that.
That's a great question. And really what you're talking about is the delicate dance, right? It's the delicate fine line that you have to walk. You want to give them enough information where there's a connection and you seem real and sincere, but if everybody was forced to disclose all of their motivations at all times, it would be pretty rough. I've done a fair amount of divorce sales. We don't ever talk about it. It's nobody's business that a couple's getting divorced. If the other agent says, hey, why are your clients selling? I might say something like, it's a lifestyle change or it's a relocation. Both of those are true. They are relocating just away from each other. And divorce is certainly a lifestyle change. What you don't want to say is, oh my gosh, they're getting divorced. The house is in foreclosure. The husband has a drinking problem and lost his job. That wouldn't serve your client. That just would give some buyer like ammunition to cut you off at the knees. The cover letter has gotten a little tricky. At one point, I think NAR or even California Association of Realtors was saying, they weren't saying don't do it, but they're saying be very careful. Back in the day, the buyer would type up the letter. My joke was, that they would put their picture from their Christmas card, which is them sitting on a log on the beach and they're wearing, white shirts and all matching khaki pants, or they're all in denim or something silly, right? The joke was, hey, go take a picture of your family with the golden retriever. And if you don't have a golden retriever, I know somebody who has one, you can borrow it. That was the running joke because I got so many pictures of the family on the beach with the golden retriever. You do have to be careful with that. You want to make sure that you're not setting your clients up to be judged negatively based on factors that might violate fair housing, for instance. I fortunately don't see much of that, but I know it's around. So you have to be a little careful about making sure that you're not setting somebody up to be discriminated against. But I still like it when the buyer writes a letter saying, hey, this is who we are and this is why we'd love to own your home, right? And I've had clients say, I would rather sell my house to a young family because I grew up here. Now, is that discriminating against somebody who doesn't have a young family? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It's not based on race or religion or anything. It's an emotional thing that they go, look, I was raised here, it's my dad's house, or we raised our family here. And we would love to see, the next generation have this. So certainly tugging at heartstrings works, right? I actually had a famous musician give me one of those letters, and the pictures that accompanied their letter was with this person was with Elton John in front of the Eiffel Tower. But the 85-year-old or 80-year-old seller said to her daughter, she goes, I don't know who any of those people are. So the daughter had to say, well, Mom, that's Elton John. Let's start there. I think a little bit like attorneys do. I'm very optimistic. I'm very positive. But I look at situations and I go, how could this go sideways? What could go wrong here? And it's really important to take a beat and think about that. Right? Words matter, pictures matter, everything matters. We're being judged constantly, whether we think we are or not, or whether we think that's okay or not. So just be careful and methodical and intentional.
So where in the process is the most common place that you see deals falling apart?
Look, I always joke that it's really easy to get a property into escrow. It's much harder to keep it in escrow. Our team, almost always does pre-listing inspections. At a minimum, we do a home inspection. We have termites in California. We do a termite inspection, and then we also do a sewer lateral or septic inspection. The basic three. The home inspector says, hey, that pool equipment looks really rough. We might get a pool inspector. If there's a well or something else, we might have a well inspection. Doing all of that and paying attention to it takes a lot of that stuff off the table. right? If you get those inspections and you sit down with your buyer and you contextualize what these reports and inspections are really saying, because they can be scary, right? I remember getting a home inspection that said live exposed electrical wiring shock hazard. It was a 29-cent switch plate cover with 2 little white screws. Sounds horrible on the report. Like, oh my God, yeah, if you stick your hand in there where there's no cover, you might get a shock. But when you look at it and contextualize and go, for 29 cents, I can fix that dangerous condition. That's the context, right? Before I ever locate the property with the buyer, and I'm very consistent with this and very intentional, I say, when you find your property and either get their inspection or we have an inspection done, if you read a home inspection and you don't wonder why you're buying that property, hire another home inspector. They should give you pause because it's going to be a very long list of little things. And I tell them that up front. If you wait until they found the property, I think if you go through this dialogue, they think you're just trying to justify a sale. You're just trying to push them into a sale. So I get in front of it before they've even found the property and go, just expect this. When you get this, you're going to look at that report and go, oh no, I'm not buying this house. And then when it happens, and they laugh when you go through this process with them, they always laugh. And then when you actually give them a home inspection and they call you and they go, oh my God, this looks horrible. The house is falling down. I say, hey, do you remember that conversation where you were driving around in that one neighborhood? And they're like, yeah, I remember that. I'm like, well, this is where you find yourself is being really terrified of a home inspection. So that's where the experience comes in, to be able to put people's mind at ease, to acknowledge like, yeah, that is a big thing and it's going to be really expensive. So let's talk about whether you're willing to put a new foundation under this old house, which is a thing here because we have some very old homes. So again, acknowledge the elephants in the room, but if you are able to project that calmness and that experience and like, hey, this is typical, this is a typical report, without minimizing, because it's still important, right? You can't minimize their fear and you can't minimize the inspection, but you can minimize the impact.
Right. Communicate everything. You also mentioned in the article that offers shouldn't be written in a vacuum. So who should agents be collaborating with throughout the process to ensure a well-drafted offer?
Well, the vacuum thing that I was talking about was specific to the fact that people write offers without any information about what it is that they could have in their arsenal to write an attractive offer, because they don't communicate. Again, I got 2 offers on a property this week. I mean, I know the agents, I was there during the showings, but they didn't call me. I told one of them, and I know him pretty well. He's a good guy. I said, hey, we have the normal reports and inspections, because we take the 3 inspections that I told you about, the home inspection, termite and sewer lateral, and then we package that with a preliminary title report and a natural hazards disclosure. So we call that the package of 5, and that's sort of the basic opening ante of stuff that people would really want to see, right? And then if we can get them up front, we'll also package in the seller disclosures, because we're just trying to take it all off the table. We're just doing our very best to take this off the table. And you cut down on failed escrows by doing that. But if you don't call the other agent and learn as much as you can about what you need to know, then you're writing an offer in a vacuum. Also, if you're not a very experienced agent, and again, I know the CRS community tends to be a lot more experienced, but get help. Get somebody in your office that's experienced to help you. Getting part of something is better than getting nothing of something, right? If you're going on a listing presentation and it's a price point you're not comfortable with, or a location that's maybe not an area you've worked in before, partner up with somebody. It's so much more professional. And if they're a great agent, you'll learn something, right? You'll get the benefit. You'll give up a little commission, but you could earn invaluable lessons.
I'm seeing a trend: communication and networking, aspects of becoming a really great, well-rounded agent, right? So what are some of the things that agents can start thinking about to make them better deal architects rather than just negotiators?
I love deal architect. Can I steal that? Again, I think it's all the big picture. I think and it takes time. You have to build the relationship with these agents, which is tough. Like, look, I know agents in LA. I asked an agent in LA, like, how often do you do a deal, more than one deal with a real estate agent? And her response was, well, if it's in this neighborhood, I think she picked on Hancock Park. She goes, look, I do some work in Hancock Park, and, there's a few agents that that's where they do most of their work. You might do a deal with the same agent more than once, but it's rare. I mean, I think they have more agents in Los Angeles than we have people in Santa Barbara, or at least members of the MLS. I don't know how many are agents, but in smaller communities, the relationships are so critical, right? They just are. I guess in LA, what you have to do is really create the relationship deal by deal without any previous momentum. But I know, when I call other agents in Santa Barbara, it's kind of laid back here. I don't launch right into business like, oh, hey, I heard your kid got a scholarship to college or won the soccer tournament or something. In the same way you might talk to a client, that you might build some rapport and some connection, right? Some human connection. Again, being relational versus transactional. So then those agents might be more comfortable sharing information with you that they would not share with somebody they don't know. If I get a call from an agent I don't know, I'm a little more guarded because I just don't know. It's human nature. And if it's somebody I know and trust and I've done multiple deals with, I might give them a little more encouragement. Years ago, I do a lot of administration of wills, trusts, and probates. And we had a trust sale up on the Riviera in this neighborhood in Santa Barbara. And we got 2 offers from the same company, a big national company. I sent them to the trustee. The niece was the trustee. And I said, look, this one agent, I don't know her. I looked her up. It doesn't look like she's really sold much. She's probably a great person. I don't know. I just telling you, I don't have any background information. The other agent was one of the top producing agents in the country for that company. And he had written a pretty good offer. It was really clean. But for instance, he didn't acknowledge the reports and inspections because he had just gotten them and he's trying to give his clients some time to go through them. And there's a couple of other things. I asked the trustee if I could coach the agent that I knew and trusted into success. And she said, if it gets more money for the trust, you do what you got to do. So I called the other agent and I said, why didn't you acknowledge the reports and inspections? He goes, we just got them, but we're going through them. He goes, how much time do I have? And I said, what do you need? And he goes, I don't know, tomorrow morning at 10. I said, I don't think the seller will have a problem with that. And then I said, your price is okay, but it's not as competitive as it could be. And he said, what do I need to do? And I said, well, it needs to probably start with X. I didn't give him a number. I just said, if I were you, I would at least have this in front of it. And he went noticeably over that. I didn't tell him to do that. He took that, I think it was a $2 million property. And I said, I think you got to start with a 2. And he didn't just come in at $2,005,000. I think he came in at 2.1 or something. Right. But I let them do that. I let them discover what their comfort zone was for that. And by the way, we got that deal put together. I didn't talk to that agent until 3 days before the close when he called me to see if the key was still there so they could do their final walkthrough. That's how easy that deal was because we front loaded all the work, right? We had the relationship. They had the reports and inspections. It worked really well. The trust got more money than they would have from the other offer. I felt bad for that gal. I'm sure she's fine. I just don't know her.
That's why it's so important, why we keep mentioning the CRS community. You don't have to wonder who's across the table from you. You know they're educated and respected in the industry. I
describe them as serious. I think in every industry, there's people who are serious about the industry and people who aren't. And I think that type of community, we're just a little more serious sounds rough. Let's say intentional, professional, whatever you want to call it. But you're right. For years, I had that 4-inch thick CRS directory on my desk. People like, who do you know in South Bend, Indiana? I'm like, let me see. There I am flipping through the pages. And I still get people on the phone and say, hey, look, this is, who I have as a client and, tell me about yourself and let's see if there's a compatibility here. I don't just willy-nilly send people names, but I've leaned heavily on the CRS community for the referrals.
And you don't even have to order that big, thick directory anymore. It can all be found at find.crs.com. If you could leave our listeners with one piece of advice when it comes to engineering an offer, what would that be?
Show up curious. Show up curious for your clients. Show up curious when you're getting intel or information about the other side. Just collect as much information as you can. And when you ask a lot of questions, for instance, with your buyers, if you ask a lot of questions and you understand what the sticking points are and the problems are or the challenges are, if you have enough information, it makes it a heck of a lot easier to address them, right? As opposed to sort of discovering along the way. If you've done your homework up front, starting with the buyer consultation, starting with, hey, in a perfect world, what does, an offer on this property and acquiring this property look like for you? Whatever it is, however you want to structure it, whatever the dialogue is, show up curious and listen with intentionality, right? If you build out the question tree, then you can be an active listener. Most of us, while somebody's talking to us, we're thinking about the next thing we want to say, right? So if you can get into the muscle memory of knowing what the right questions are that you need to ask, and then get that out of the way up front, you can be an active listener. So be intentional, get as much information as you can, and it really makes it easier to service people.
Thank you so much again, Steve, for your insights. This was a lot of really great information, and we appreciate you being here today. Where can our listeners connect with you and learn more?
It's our website is theepsteinpartners.com. That's a good place to start. We have some wonderful stuff about our lovely community, which if you've never vacationed in Santa Barbara, we are a destination resort. Montecito, Santa Barbara, San Ynez Valley. There's a ton of fun stuff to do here. So I'm starting to sound like the Conference and Visitors Bureau or something. But anyway, or you can follow us on Facebook.
It's been great having Steve Epstein with us. Listeners, follow him on Facebook, find him on the web, find a course that he instructs. Thanks for joining us today. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to Real Estate Real Talk. If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll pass along our web address, crs.com/realtalk, to your friends and colleagues. Please leave us a positive review wherever you listen to our podcast, and be sure to check out our archive section on our website for previous episodes. This has been a Residential Real Estate Council production. Join us next time for another edition of Real Estate Real Talk.